Chiefs Kingdom, and welcome to the MKE CHIEFScast live from the Wolf Den special edition, where we will be joined by a very special guest. As always, I'm Josh.
And I'm Chris. With us today is author David Smale. So David has covered sports in Kansas City for, I think, over 40 years, and he's published 21 books, including this gem right here, The Keys to the Kingdom. David also has a book coming out with Joe Lundardi, which is about bracketology, March Madness, college basketball, and the creation of a national obsession. And in the near future, he's also going to have a podcast coming out called Sports Connections.
And of course, we are joined by our hype man extraordinaire, Brian. Give it up for Brian. We're presented by Complete Weddings and Events, your leading provider of photo, video, DJ, photo booth, lighting, and coordination services. Let's get to work, gentlemen. All right. So, David, first of all, welcome. We're all huge fans of the Keys to the Kingdom book. And that's actually how I think we originally got connected and everything. Just working through this group and doing the pre-sale, and we're all huge fans. We're going to get to the book in more detail here very soon. But to get started, I think the overall thing that I'm noticing just every time that I communicate with you is you're a very, very busy guy, and you network very, very well with the sports world. And I guess my first big question is, clearly your passion, your life's calling, all of these things are sports writing. So what moment did you realize that sports writing was your passion and your calling?
You're going to lob one in to begin with, making an easy one. I don't know that I've still gotten to that point, to be honest with you. It just kind of happened. I was in college, and my roommates got mad at me because I could write term papers the night before they were due. And I didn't realize that was unusual, but I would just have everything. I'd have all my notes together, have everything kind of written out. And I won't tell you how old I am, but computers were not thought of for homes at that point. So I had an old electric typewriter, and I felt privileged that mine actually plugged into the wall rather than the old manual. But I'd type them, I'd write them up the night before, and then I figured out that I could cover sports, use those writing abilities and cover sports, and it just kept growing. And the book writing actually happened, sorry to say, Chris and Brian, when I was at graduate school at Kansas State. And I was in class, in a graduate school class with the sports information director, and getting ready to close Ahern Fieldhouse, their basketball facility that rivaled, I guess I should say now, Allen Fieldhouse, which I think is the best basketball arena in the country. But Ahern Fieldhouse was almost as loud and was really, really cool. And I said, what are you going to do to commemorate? And because over the 38 years of that building, they had won more Big 8 championships than anybody, including that one just down the highway to the west. And he said, we're going to sell T-shirts. And I said, well, you need to do something more commemorative than that. He said, like what? And I said, well, like a book or something. He said, well, you're a writer. Why don't you write it? And I said, I'm not a book writer. I'm a story writer. And he said, well, how hard can it be? It's just a series of stories. Come by my office tomorrow. So I did. The next morning, went into his office, and we started chatting for a little bit. He goes, well, hang on a second. Let me make this quick phone call. Picks up the phone and calls Lon Kruger, who was the basketball coach. Oh, wow. And he says, Lon, I want you to meet somebody. We have an idea. All right, we'll be right down. So we go down to the basketball office. We walk in. He introduces me to Lon, and Lon and I are still good friends to this day, 32 years later. And he says, Lon, I want you to, David and I were in class last night together, and we came up with this idea. He would like to do a book on the history of Ahern Fieldhouse. And Lon said, sounds like a great idea. Is he the one to do it? And he said, well, he's a good writer, and I think he's the one to do it. He says, okay, hang on a second. Picks up the phone, calls Steve Miller, the athletic director. He says, Steve, there's somebody I need you to meet. Okay, we'll be right down. So we walk down the hall. We walk in. Steve says, I'm really busy. What's up? And he says, well, David and Kenny came up with this idea to do a book on the history of Ahern Fieldhouse. And he said, you want him to do it? He said, yeah. He said, Kenny, is this the guy to do it? He goes, yeah, he's a good writer. He goes, okay, done. that was my negotiation. And I wrote that book, and I've, as you said, the Keys to the Kingdom is number 21. The Lundardi book is number 22, and I've got several others that are in the works. And I enjoy doing it.
Gotcha. So is your favorite book always the newest one that you have out?
Yeah, it's like asking which is my favorite kid. But yeah, this one certainly, this one will probably hold on for a while though. I remember the Chiefs coming to Kansas City in 1963. I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad being excited that we had pro football. So I was excited. And, I've been a fan for as long as they've been in Kansas City. So this book it's not only the most recent one, but it's also one that was very, very personal. When the publisher approached me, they said, "This is your own memories." And so that made it more personal and maybe more enjoyable. That's why I was able to get it done quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely reading through it, you can tell that it was just truly a passionate super fan that wrote the book. I don't think there's any way to fake what came out on the pages by any means whatsoever. And so the whole thing came out quickly. Define quickly.
Well, it's not going to be under the same paragraph or the same section as sane. But
sure.
I was walking into the Big 12 tournament this past March, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who I had helped write a book. And he said, "Do you mind if I give your contact information to a publisher that's looking for help with a book?" And I said, "No, you don't need my permission. Just do that whenever you want." And that night I'm sitting courtside and I'm watching a game, covering a game, and my phone's buzzing, and I wouldn't have been able to hear it anyway. So I let it go to voicemail. And when I got back to the media room, there's a message saying, with Reedy Press, and please call me at 8:00 tomorrow morning. I want to talk to you about a book on the history of the Chiefs. And he said, "I've got a meeting at 8:30, so call me at 8." I'm not a morning person, especially if I'm working till midnight, but I figured I could make an exception. So I was up, alert, showered, shaved, everything before 8:00. And he got me all excited because he said, "This isn't a narrative history. It's a series of short features on people and events that shaped the franchise's history. You can include your own personal memories." And so I said, "Great, I'd love to do it." He said, "Good, deadline's June 15th. And
this is during March Madness, right?
This is during March Madness, yeah. And I said, "That's 3 months." And he said, "Well, we can find someone else." And I said, "I didn't say I wouldn't do it. I just saying that's really, really fast." And I said, "So of course, if I get it to you in that amount of time, you'll have it out by the start of the season." He said, "No, it'll be out at the end of October." And I said, "Why in the world would you release a book on football at the end of October?"
Yeah.
He said, "Just in time for Christmas." And I said, "But it's football. So you want to release it, at the start of the season. When would you need the manuscript to have it out by the start of the season?" And he said, "That's impossible." I said, "All right, let me rephrase the question. When would you need the manuscript to have it out by the start of the season?" And he said, "April 15th. And I really think he expected me to push back because when I said, "Okay," he pushed back. He's like, "Well, I'm not guaranteeing anything." And I said, "I know, but you'll have it." And I was at that point trying to figure out how to get it done. And later that morning, I went to the Big 12 for the big day, the Thursday with 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
And for half hour before the first game, they called us into the interview room and said, "Tournament's canceled." And driving home, I hear NCAA tournaments canceled. And then before I get home, I hear Major League Baseball is shutting down spring training and MLS is shutting down. And I'm a sports writer. I didn't have anything to do. And so I basically wrote this book in 2 weeks.
Jeez. Brian, do you have any 40s to pull out for all the sports that we missed over the summer? 2 weeks, that's crazy. I mean, that takes writing the term paper the night before it's due to an extreme level. I mean, this is the 20-page paper that you start out at 4:00 in the morning and do nothing but drink coffee with 5-hour energy poured in it and everything. That's crazy. So,
or writing your master's thesis in a couple of days. I mean, that's really incredible.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, you either have the talent or you don't. You clearly have the talent and the vision and everything to put this together. So let's get into the vision a little bit more. So you get this assignment. Let's talk about the Chiefs. okay, super. Here's a giant, just massive mountain that we're trying to
Yeah.
break down into something. We're going to start eating the dinosaur. How did you get started? What made you, I guess, pick the stuff that you were going to include? Did you start with, we're going to do the whole timeline and we're going to pick everything I remember? Did you sit there and research a bunch of stats, or what was the actual process to get to what was included?
That's a great question. And really it deals with the outline. Anytime I write more than a game story, and if I'm writing a feature story, if I'm writing a book, whatever it is, anything of any length at all, I always start with an outline, and I will jot down everything that I think needs to be in that outline. And I don't always stick to it exactly, but if I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, then I'll actually adjust the outline on the way. So the very first thing I did, actually it was Thursday that we agreed to do it, or that I agreed. They got back to me Saturday saying, okay, you're good. So I spent Saturday and Sunday working on the outline. And I actually had some friends who are my age or even a little older who are longtime Chiefs fans, who looked at my outline and said, don't forget this, you might want to add that, stuff like that. So it wasn't totally my memory, but the outline was built from my memory of the different things. And then I did some quick research on, just Chiefs highlights to see if there was something that jumped out at me. But I basically had the outline first. And the nice thing about this particular one is it's not a narrative history. So I didn't have to figure out, how do I transition between the Christmas Day game in 1971, which was the last game at Municipal Stadium, and to the first game at Arrowhead Stadium. Each one of those stories was unique in and of itself. So if I felt like writing about offense, I could write about, Otis Taylor and Stephon Page and Bill Kenny and Steve DeBerg and Elvis Grbac and people like that. I could do what I wanted. And then once I was done, I filed it. And by working with an outline like that, it's very liberating, because once I got through with the story, I was done. Now, obviously I go back later and reread it and stuff, but I didn't have to think, now, how did I write about that to make sure I'm writing it in the same way? So that was a big help.
So essentially you got to live the dream of every single guy that's worked in the factory or sat at the bar and had the conversation with his buddies about just the play that helped, get him through whatever it was he was going through, the boss that sucked, all of those things. That's phenomenal. That's great. And
pretty much.
Yeah. And I loved reading everything, just the raw sense of the story and letting every single, story live on its own. Chris, hold that book up again real quick.
Oh, yeah. And I'll just say, David, I mean, it brought up a lot of memories for me. I started being a fan in the early 90s. So, I mean, it's a great book.
Well, thank you. That was my goal, to be honest. Once they told me what they wanted me to do, and they gave me some very tight parameters. The longest story could be 550 words, because they didn't want anything carrying over to the next 2-page spread. And so there was stuff that I had to cut. But once they gave me those parameters and told me that, there were no exceptions, then my goal became, I want to write this in a way that if anybody remembered that particular game or that particular player or whatever, that it would help them rekindle their own memories of that particular event.
Gotcha. So we got to relive every party you had to be at. That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. So clearly a huge Chiefs fan, and just based on all the K-State stories that you had before, clearly just a college sports fan. So let's kind of roll into the next book that's coming out. You have the bracketology book that's coming out with Joe Lundardi, which, by the way, davidsmalebooks.com, and that's SMALE books.com, is where you can get every single one of his titles before, and you can also place a pre-sale order for the bracketology book. If you want to get this Keys to the Kingdom book for the special Chiefs fan in your life, which we're all special and I know you have one, make sure that you get that order in right away, and you're going to have some probably expedited shipping, but it's totally worth it. So bracketology, how do you know Joe Lundardi? How did this connection happen?
It's interesting. My professional life is defined by the motto, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so I made connections. I used to work at the NCAA with Bill Hancock, And when I left the NCAA, I wanted to keep writing because that's what I did for them. And I saw him at, I don't remember what event, but I saw him and I said, who do I contact about writing for the NCAA programs? And he put me in touch with, at the time it was Host Communications. Now it's IMG College. And so I've written for the Final Four program like 14 straight years. And I've had a bunch of stories. I've had at least one every year, and most years I've had two. And in the 2019 program, they assigned me a story on the history of bracketology with a lower B. And of course, Joe doesn't own the copyright to that name, but with a capital B, everybody associates it with Joe and ESPN. And when I did the interview with him, we just hit it off. Ordinarily, if I do an interview for a 500-word story, or in this case, a 1,500-word story, it's 15 to 20, maybe 30 minutes at the most. We talked for like an hour and something. And I just, I took to him. He is very, very funny. One of the things, I got through, I said, I really appreciate all the time you gave me. I said, I appreciate your sense of humor and your humility. And his response was, if I give you my wife's number, will you call her and tell her that? And, we just hit it off, and it was just fun to do. And so I'm always thinking, well, what else can I be doing? And so about a week later, I emailed him and I said, have you ever thought about a book on bracketology? We're going to try and summarize it in 1,500 words. What about a book? And his response was, yeah, I guess I actually asked him to call me. So this was a conversation. He said, yeah, I've been approached dozens of times. And I said, well, then who ended up writing it? He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, if you've been approached dozens of times, who wrote the book? He said, nobody. And I said, that's about to change. And I basically forced myself on him. He finally admitted that his agent had been trying to convince him that this was worth doing. And he said, coming at me from two different sides, maybe I ought to consider it. And his agent found Triumph Books being willing to publish it. And we had so much fun. He is, I love self-deprecating humor. He talks about the fact that his wife is amazed that he can make a living doing this. And he said, my dad's favorite expression is behind every successful man is a surprised woman. Yeah. And I certainly can attest to that, being married almost 40 years.
Yep.
But we had so much fun. He tells stories in this book that, like he said, he gets criticized by a lot of people that don't know the whole story. And one time when he was doing the ESPN chats, and they don't do those anymore, but this one guy gets on there because it was a year that St. Joe basketball was really good, but they didn't play anybody.
Yeah.
And he was waffling between the 1 and 2 seed for them.
Jameer Nelson, Delonte West.
Yeah. He is a 1982 graduate of St. Joseph University.
Oh,
his
man.
parents, his grandparents, his two older brothers went to St. Joe. His wife went to St. Joe. After graduating, he spent 30 years in administration at St. Joe.
Can't give him the 2 seed.
he starts going back and forth with this guy, and the guy says, you probably never heard of Delonte West or Phil Martelli. You probably never even heard of St. Joe. You probably don't know where it is. And he responds to the guy, goes, actually, I'm probably about 100 yards from you. Come over to my office in such and such hall, and we'll duke it out. Well, Joe's he comes about here on me. He's about 5'6", but he was threatening the guy on, and then he laughs at himself. But it was so much fun to do because he's a hoops nerd, and I'm a sports nerd in general. But when he came to visit Kansas City, I picked him up at the airport, and he's giving me trivia, Royals trivia, that what happened on that day. Well, it was the day that the Phillies beat the Royals in Game 6 in the 1980 World Series. And he's just jabbing me, and we had just met like an hour before. So we had fun doing it, and now we're having fun with Twitter, with all that stuff.
For the record, that fight story of him, getting aggressive with the guy, that's the most Philly story that I've heard since the Declaration of Independence. And I actually had a really good friend from high school that went to school in Philly, and I had no idea what that city was about until I went out there. I'm like, cool, give me a cheesesteak, and who am I fighting tonight?
Totally. Boo Santa Claus.
Yeah, they boot Santa Claus
yeah.
through D batteries, but you know what? We all had a Yingling. We're good. We moved on with our lives. We're
exactly.
we're good to go. No, that's crazy. So before we get into the next stuff, I guess my next question is, when's the last time that you can recall doing something halfway? Because it seems like you just fall into these crazy just time and place situations, and you just grab the bull by the horns, and you have these crazy fun stories, and you're living life, and it's awesome.
I don't know. That's I love what I do. I can honestly say I have not taken a day off since my wedding anniversary, which is August 22nd.
Oh,
and
congratulations.
And yeah, it'll be 40 years next summer. But one, my wife likes it that I work this much. And I'm not working, 12 hours every day, but there's something either with sale of the book or working on another project or something where I'm working every day, and I absolutely love it. And I know that if I didn't have something to do, I'd either be sitting in front of the TV or getting into trouble. And so I might as well go at it full speed ahead and do something productive at the same time.
Well, so there's the old saying, if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. And it sounds like you're living that absolute dream. So let's get into the next thing. The Kansas City Star has recently commissioned you to write a weekly edition. And if the first edition of that is any indication, it seems like this is we're going to get into Kansas City sports, folklore, and we're going to get into maybe the B-sides of sports. Am I reading that right, or what's the philosophy behind this?
Yep, you're this close. One, I wasn't commissioned. I volunteered. I contacted the sports editor, and I have written some story. I worked for the Star back in the early 80s, but I know the sports editor, and I approached him and said, if I write these stories for you and I don't ask for any money for them, will you let me publicize my book? And he said yes. And so the $100 I would make from writing a feature, if I need to sell 2.5 books to make that pay for itself. And it already has. And the first one that I did was on Curtis McClinton, the one you saw. I'm interviewing Christian Okoye tomorrow. I actually talked to one of the guys that's in that book that not a lot of people remember, Elmo Wright. I talked to him this afternoon, and he's going to be the third feature. And basically, it's kind of a where are they now? What are they remembered for? Elmo Wright was remembered, or is remembered, for the one who invented the end zone dance. And the story behind that is, back when he was playing college ball, freshmen weren't eligible. So his first year, which was his sophomore year, he led the nation in receiving yards and receptions, didn't sniff an All-America team because Houston was independent. The next year, he increased his numbers, didn't sniff an All-America team. The sports information department said, you might want to do something to draw attention to yourself. Unlike what a lot of athletes do today, he decided to come up with the end zone dance. And, after every touchdown, I'll see if I can do it here, he would pump up his knees like this and then spike the ball. And it wasn't illegal. Yeah. And so, he didn't get penalized for it. And he did that after every touchdown in his senior year, and his numbers were way down from his junior year, but he was first-team All-American, was drafted in the first round by the Chiefs. And so, I knew him. My uncle was his agent, and so that's how I got to know him. In fact, when I was talking to him today, I said, and it's probably been 40, almost 50 years since I've seen him. And I said, my sports claim to fame, I was not a very good athlete. I love playing. I wasn't a very good athlete. My sports claim to fame is that I beat a professional athlete in one-on-one basketball. Now, I'm not saying you let me win. And he starts cackling. And so I said, you can be guaranteed that's going to be in my story, or at least on the podcast that we'll do with him. But I don't know how I tend to go off on tangents because I don't have an outline in front of me. But that's where we're going with these stories. That's what it was with the Star. It's mostly Chiefs. I haven't gotten permission to branch beyond that when I run out of former Chiefs. But I think if it goes well, they'll probably let me.
Yeah, good stuff. So we're talking about Elmo, right? He played for Hank Strom, right?
Hank Stram, yeah.
Yeah. So you had the just the embracing the characters, and I think that Chris, looking at his face, knows where I'm going with this. So probably the two most successful coaches that we've had in our history are Hank and our current guy Reed, and it seems like they just have this uncanny ability to let guys be themselves and just think of things like the sports are fun,
Yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong, this is a job for a lot of people. I mean, this is Clark Hunt's livelihood. This is the entire, infrastructure of the team's management's livelihood. But at the end of the day, we're playing a sport. This is fun.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are our idols for a reason. We love these guys for a reason. I mean, I love playing sports. I'm a horrible, athlete, kind of like you were saying. Like Brian and I play golf together, and that's how that stuff goes. So, we look up to all these guys, and it's just, it's great. And when you have the Reeds and the Stroms of the world to just let these guys kind of live their life is just awesome.
Yeah. And they're, one of the things with 40 years in sports writing that I've come to appreciate is these are just guys, they may be able to hit a baseball that's aiming, coming right at them at 90 plus miles an hour, much better than I could, or they may be able to throw a spiral, 80 yards in the air or whatever. So they're better at that than I am, but they're still just people. And when you get the opportunity to be around them, that's what makes what I do a lot of fun. I will tell you my favorite Stram story, and I didn't put it in the book, and you'll understand why when I get through telling you this. You guys will probably remember Bill Grigsby, who was he's mentioned in I did a 2-page spread on the voices of the Chiefs.
Yeah,
and
I love that part.
Bill Grigsby was the color guy for every single one of them, beginning with the very first one, Merle Harmon, on through Mitch Holtis, and of course Bill Grigsby's deceased now. And Grigsby was a character.
Yeah,
now he would say it's a beautiful day for football or whatever, but he was a bit of a cut up, and I guess Stram was too. And so when I'm speaking to a group and there's a crowd, I will say that I know this story is true because Grigsby told it to me, and then I'll pause and I'll say, actually, that probably means it's not true because Grigsby told it to me. But this is the story, and there's no way to verify whether it happened or not because they're both deceased. But right after Super Bowl IV, somebody contacted Griggs and said, would you come up and speak at a fundraising dinner for us? And he said, we'll pay you. And he said, yeah, that's fine. I'll do that. I said, great. Bring Hank Stram, which was really a way. They asked him because they figured he would be easier to get to, and that they really wanted Stram to come up. And so they drove up there and talked about the fact that they were going to get paid. They had no idea how much, but they would get paid, and they'd be able to tell stories about the Super Bowl and stuff like that. And so they're sitting up at the head table, and the MC gets up and he says, all right, we have 2 special guests, and we're going to let them speak separately. And Hank, why don't you come up first? And while he's up there, the guy brings an envelope by the table and gives it to Grigsby. And he said, what's this? He said, this is what we agreed to pay you. He said, oh, great. So he opens up the envelope, and there's 4 $100 bills in there. And in 1970, that's a pretty good chunk of change.
Yeah.
And so Grigsby takes one of those hundreds, puts it in his pocket, puts the other 3 back in the envelope, puts the envelope on the table. A little bit later, Hank gets through talking, and the MC steps up and says, Hank, thanks very much. Bill, why don't you come on up? And they pass on the dais, but they don't say anything to each other. And so Grigsby gives his little talk, and he comes back and he says to Hank, what's in the envelope? He said, oh, that's what they agreed to pay us. And he said, oh, really? How much is in there? He says, $200.
That's great.
So they both made the same amount of money they would have made otherwise by cheating each other equally. So that tells the character, you're talking about letting them play. And I think it came very naturally for Hank as well.
Well, one thing, David, actually really quick, I actually listened to you bring this up on Bob Fesco's show, is just the counterculture that was embraced, especially by, the Hunt family. and that seemed to be a big part of the organization, at the early outset.
Yeah. And are you talking about the racial side of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's important to note. And it was a football decision.
Right.
The historically Black colleges and universities were not looked to for football players. There may have been a few from the HBCUs in the NFL in the late 1950s, but it was not a source of talent.
Right.
And I heard a statistic recently that in 1960, 12% of NFL players were Black. And those were people like Marion Motley and Jim Brown that they just simply could not ignore. They were that good.
Mm-hmm.
But the HBCUs were ignored. And the AFL, especially Lamar Hunt, recognized that they were a great source of talent. But he lived in the South. He lived in Dallas where, segregation was really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a risky business decision. But he not only would draft players from the HBCUs, but he would make them feel like they were part of the family. And he not only wouldn't let his team eat in restaurants that wouldn't serve Blacks or stay in hotels that wouldn't allow Blacks to stay there. If he was by himself and there was a sign on the restaurant window that said no Blacks allowed, he wouldn't go in himself when he could eat anywhere he wanted. So it was a very important thing. And it certainly played a critical role in the integration of pro football. By 1970, when the merger happened, it was like 35% Black, and I think it's probably 70. I don't know the number, but probably 75% Black now. And you think about some of the players that may not have been in the NFL. I mean, the early Chiefs, you had Otis Taylor and Jim Marcellus and I don't remember where Kearney went, but Willie Lanier went to Morgan State, and a lot of their stars, Buck Buchanan went to Grambling. A lot of their stars were from the HBCUs. And you think about later in the NFL, Jerry Rice went to Mississippi Valley State, and Walter Payton went to Jackson State. And I wonder if they would have been allowed to play in the NFL if it hadn't been for the early emphasis that Lamar Hunt brought to it.
Yeah.
Well, and just picture a league without those names. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
insane. It's insane. It's insane to think that was even a possibility. But I had another question I wanted to ask you. So you basically threw out a really horrible what if type of situation. So let's think of football and let's think of the Chiefs specifically. Let's play a what if game. What is your biggest what if in Chiefs history? What's the time that you can think back to? If they had done this, we would be. What's your what if?
Oh boy. The first one that comes to mind is Christmas Day, 1971. I was 13. And if Jan Stenerud, who still says it's his fault, even though his teammates say it wasn't, Lynn Dawson says he fumbled the snap a little bit. But if Stenerud had been able to kick those field goals, or if Podolak had been able to, return the kickoff a little bit farther, or there were so many things that could have happened. That's the first one that jumps to mind. If and I'm not going to blame Dee Ford, but if the side judge had, like most side judges do, say, hey, you're lined up offside, scoot back. If Lynn Elliott had been able to kick with that, my feet are still cold. I was sitting in the upper deck that night, and my feet are still cold. But the funny thing is, who the most accurate kicker in Chiefs history before Harrison Butker came, that most accurate kicker in Chiefs history is?
It was Lynn Elliott, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have guessed that it was Nick Lowry.
Yeah.
Mainly because that was the answer I wanted it to be, but it was Lynn Elliott. It was Lynn Elliott. And
exactly.
And then you have the first Norwegian football player in Stenerud, and I mean we've had a great history of kickers. My personal what if is what if in '83 would have drafted Marino, Marty Ball Marino. That's my crazy what if situation.
The thing about that is would Marino have been as successful under Marv Levy?
And I mean, I think that's kind of the situation we're looking at right now. I mean, we obviously live an hour and a half away from Chicago. I personally have a ton of family from Chicago. Living in Milwaukee had nothing to do with that. But, the whole Trubisky I think it's insane to think about, oh, you should have picked Mahomes. Well, okay, nobody was picking Mahomes. It took a visionary like Brett Veach and his, group of people that he assembled and Andy Reid to pull the real magic out of the situation. You're out of your mind. You didn't draft Deshaun Watson. But
well, how many of us when they announced that the Buffalo Bills have made a trade and the Kansas City Chiefs now have the 8th pick, think, oh, good, they're getting Deshaun Watson.
So
and you're picking Mahomes? What? What's wrong with them? I mean, I'll admit, I was thinking that.
Yeah. So actually, really interesting situation. We had a party, and we were looking at switching the place that we had our watch party. So we had a party for the draft, and what's funny is in a number of years since Mahomes has come on, just the members of the people up here that are just like, well, we don't need to be having a draft party. We're a good team. I don't want to sit around and wait until the 32nd pick.
Yeah.
Back in the day, that was one of the things to look forward to. And so we were looking at this new location, and we had the party, and when they traded up, we all knew that it was kind of coming, and we knew they were going to pick a quarterback. I'll be the first to admit I was in the Deshaun Watson camp. I'm like, let's pick Deshaun Watson. Dabo Sweeney said he's Michael Jordan, this, that, and the other. I mean,
I was in the Mahomes camp. I know it's kind of weird, but I watched a lot of him at Texas Tech, and I was very convinced by the way he played and the way he interacted with Cliff Kingsbury and the way he commanded the offense and his talent. When they traded up, I actually thought, oh my gosh, they're going to go after and get Patrick.
I had seen a lot of Texas Tech football, covering K-State football, and what I thought was, guy can throw it all over the yard, but he doesn't know where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that thought arm talent, but Brett Favre without the this sounds funny. Brett Favre without the control. Brett Favre in control. But I mean, basically a poor man's Brett Favre, maybe a better way to say it, is what people thought about Patrick Mahomes. And he is he's the most accurate guy now. Yeah. What he does is just absolutely unbelievable, especially consider the way he played in college.
Yeah, I love the saying, you always try and compare someone to someone in the past, but really with Patrick, no, he's the first of his kind. I mean, he's going to be compared to, to players down the line.
Yeah.
And it's all just time and place. I mean, you just had this perfect situation where you had the right guy that just knew how to drive the Lamborghini he was given the keys to. It's crazy.
And and I will say one more thing. He had somebody giving him driver's ed that knew how to drive the Lamborghini. Who basically showed him how to drive it that first year. And I think it's, at some point, Alex Smith's going to get a ring from 2019. Can't give it to him now. That's tampering. But at some point, they'll give him a ring because of the contribution he made.
Well, and I mean, the ring that I think Alex Smith deserves is the Ring of Honor. We're huge Alex Smith sympathizers. I mean, what he's done for this team is just crazy. But the other thing that I think was great, and what's made me be a huge Mahomes believer the entire time that I've just kind of gotten to know him as a sports fan, is just the family that he grew up in. And he grew up in just a blue-collar baseball household, and it's just a perfect situation. His dad is the relief pitcher, which is the most blue collar baseball position you can possibly have. And everybody loves him. He's the life of the party. He's just all of it. You
think about, and it's even more here in Kansas City, because you not only have all the national stuff he advertises for, you have all the local stuff as well. So he's on probably 2 out of every 3 commercials, and nobody minds.
Oh yeah. Every time I go back home to see my dad, I mean, I actually really enjoy that.
Yeah, my uncles were Pat Mahomes Sr.'s agents. So we have that personal connection. That hadn't helped me at all when interviewing Patrick. But I didn't know that until working on this particular project. And I haven't, I've been on the Zooms, but I haven't been in, face to face. But when we get back into that, I will definitely mention that. But I think you're right, Josh, because nothing phases him, because he's been around clubhouses. And here's the stat that gets me is, the idiot who came up with the quarterback rating system where 158.3 or whatever is perfect, the logic of that. But the average quarterback rating for NFL quarterbacks over however many years is like 88.3.
Mm-hmm.
One of his recent games, the Miami Dolphins game, he had 3 interceptions, and he had a 93.6 or 93.7. He has never had a below average
game. Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
had
Never.
that. That was, people were like, oh, that's a terrible game. Yeah, well, still better than average.
Yep.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, God, gotta love Patrick Mahomes. I mean, just life is an adventure, and it's the type of thing that you just sit there and wait your entire life to just have a player like that comes around, and it's just one of those. He's just so cool, and I think the thing that really made me realize how cool that guy actually is here recently. So my best friend from college, the guy who's the best man at my wedding, could not pay this guy to watch football when we were going to school. Married a woman from Denver, and he's this massive Bronco fan. And so I'm just like, dude, I can't even talk to you. But so I'm hanging out with his wife, here within the past year. And she starts talking about her, 5-year-old son, and, how he's almost the same age as my 4-year-old son. She's like, yeah, my son just really, really loves that song by the Beastie Boys. You got to fight for your right to party. And I kind of listen to her keep talking, and then finally I just start laughing and just say, I love you. I have to tell you something. I'm like, that is the Chiefs touchdown anthem. And I just see her face drop, and I just say, and at the end of the AFC Championship game, face drops another level. Travis Kelce face drops like 10 levels. Just brought that up, and that is their anthem. And she just goes, God, why does Patrick Mahomes have to be so likable? And why does his team have to be so, I hate you people, And it's like, man, we're on to something.
And I can relate to that, because one of the nicest people I know is Bill Self. And I really hate to admit that I like Bill Self and that we're actually friends, but he's a heck of a nice guy. And so I can understand what she's going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, to set this straight for everybody, you have a Jayhawk sympathizer kind of group and a K-State grad all in the same room. And what do you know? The world's not burning down, so I guess we can all get along. But
I guess to your point, David, I respect the hell out of Bill Snyder. So I mean, I guess we kind of have that going back and forth.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you my Bill Self story, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this one. Al Wallace is the guy who actually referred me to the company, the publishing company. And if you've been around Kansas City, he was a anchor on Channel 4 for 33 years.
Yeah.
And he went to Texas Tech, but when he came to Kansas City, the beat he was assigned was college basketball. And he has become a huge KU basketball fan. And so he asked Bill Self to write the foreword for his book. And Bill said, yeah, that's great. Well, basketball season kicks off, and now Bill's a little harder to track down. And finally I said, tell him that we'll come over, we'll interview him, and I'll write the foreword, and he can just sign off on it. So he contacts Bill's secretary, and she goes, yeah, he's agreeable to that. Well, I've known Bill for a while, and he's a really nice guy, and he knows that I'm a K-Stater, and he gives me grief for that, but he's nice about it, and it's friendly banter and stuff. So we get there, and Al is the most literal person I've ever met. And so as we're walking from the media room where he'd had his Thursday afternoon press conference to his office, he says, so tell me about this book. And Al starts talking about it, and he says, and you couldn't have gotten somebody better than this guy over here to write it? And Al starts defending me, and Bill's like, I know, I'm just giving you a hard time. David and I are friends. And so we go into Bill's office, and Al is doing the proper introductions, that this is how we're going to do it. And Bill's like, I know, that's fine. I trust him. So I turn the recorder on, and I ask him about 5 questions. And I said, you have anything else? And he said, no, I think we're good. And so I turn the recorder off, and he slides his chair back, and he goes, nah, I want you to make me sound intelligent. And I went, hey, coach, I mean, I can only do so much. And Al is freaking out. And Bill's cracking up, and I'm cracking up. And so it was the Thursday before Big Monday, not this past year, but the year before, when K-State was coming to KU. And so he goes, Al, now that you're retired, when are you coming over as a fan? He goes, how about coming Monday night? He goes, I'd love to. He goes, I'm not inviting him. He'll root for the wrong team. And Al starts defending me again, But Bill is a really nice guy, and I like him a lot in spite of the fact where he works.
So I love Bill Self. So when you start with "Make Me Sound Intelligent," you just say from Chanute, Kansas, or somebody like that. That's not from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So I don't think anybody can deny that you're obviously very, very well networked, and that you obviously have just a ton of people that throughout the sports world, and that you built this big just fraternity of people that you can talk to. So let's talk about what you have going on in your background. Sports Connections. What can you tell us about Sports Connections?
Well, it was an idea that I did not fall for immediately. I'm working with a couple of friends who live up in Lincoln. That one's a KU fan, his wife is a K-State fan, so they're kind of strange in that way. But they're helping me with marketing the Chiefs book. She was helping me line up book signings in Lincoln because the Chiefs Kingdom stretches a lot bigger than just the Kansas City area, and I got to know them by going up and doing some book signings in Lincoln and Omaha. And so they started talking to me about different things, excuse me. And today is, we're recording, but 8 days ago, they said, we've been talking about a way you could market your books better. Would you consider doing a podcast? And I said, no, I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to create something new like that. There's no way. And they said, well, we really think it would help sell books. Oh, okay. Well, let me think about it. And they said, what we want you to do is write down some names of people that you think would be willing to come on, do an interview with you for a podcast. And we'll do we'll basically do what Brian's doing for you guys. All you have to do is interview, which to me is the most fun part of writing, is doing the interviews to get these things. That you just you line them up, and you do the interviews and you record them, and we'll take care of everything else. And so by that same time, the next day, I had 50 names, and I now have a little over 100 names on that list. And I've sent out invitations to about 60 of them. And I've heard from 34 of them, and 33 have said yes. And the one who has said no, Jim Nance, didn't really say no. He just said, not right now. I've got too much going on, but contact me later. So tomorrow I'm interviewing Christian Okoye for my podcast. Mm-hmm. And today I interviewed Kevin Keatsman, who had you on the air. Yeah. On Friday, I'm interviewing Joe Lundardi, who will be my very first guest officially with the launch on January 4th.
That's so awesome.
January 8th on Friday, we will release the interview with Bill Snyder, and also with Steve Miller, who was the athletic director at K-State when he hired Bill Snyder, and he left K-State and went to work at Nike, and he has agreed to talk about the concept of shoe companies and college athletics. So the podcast is all about sports, but we're not going to avoid controversy.
Yeah,
we'll deal with it hopefully in a positive way, but we'll deal with it head on. But I've got some fun guests. Kenny Harrison, who won the Olympic triple jump championship in 1996, sat next to me in a class at K-State. He was a senior, and I was in grad school, and I had to take one undergrad course to get into the grad program. And sitting in the row in front of us was Greg Sharp, who later became the K-State broadcaster and then went to Nebraska. Man. Kevin Keatsman, Bruce Steinbrock, who was at WIBW for a number of years. We were talking today. I have no idea what the class was about, but we sure had fun. Yeah. 5 or 6 of us talking sports while the rest of the class was supposed to be studying. But, Kenny has agreed to be on there. And I got a confirmation from Dave LaRoche, who is a former major league pitcher, who was famous for throwing la lob. And if you don't know what that is, Google la lob. And it was a pitch where he struck out Gorman Thomas of the Milwaukee Brewers by throwing what looked like a slow pitch softball pitch. It was overhand. It had a huge arc. Yeah. And his son, Adam LaRoche, was the guy who retired from the White Sox because they wouldn't allow his son to be in the clubhouse.
Yep.
And Adam's a friend of mine, so I'm trying to get Adam to do it as well. I might put them on together. But
Oh, huge Adam Loesch fan. That's awesome.
Trying to get on there.
You can take the koozie off. We drink beer on this thing, by the way.
Or stronger things.
It's
yeah.
Pepsi Zero Sugar.
Oh, there you go. River West Stein.
I'm a teetotaler.
We're open for sponsors if you want to do it.
Yeah, here it is. There's my koozie.
There we go.
Oh,
there we go.
There you go. Yeah. That's great. All right. Well, I think I can speak for all three of us. We're sincerely looking forward to this podcast and just the people that you get into everything with. And I'm glad that your friends in Lincoln, Nebraska, totally Joe Lundardi you into doing a podcast because it seems like we've told that story twice. There is just a different victim in both of them. So before we get out of here tonight, let's make sure that we talk about, if you want to get the books, it's davidsmalebooks.com. And if you want to get in early on this podcast, it's sportsconnections.podbean.com.
Yes.
So definitely check out those. But can we talk a little bit about the current Chiefs team and get a little bit of focus on the Chiefs?
Sure.
All right. So we have a handful of things that we go through every week. And so we want to go last week, next week, and then the outlook, and then have a little bit of fun. So I guess let's think about the Miami game. I think you kind of alluded to this. Your favorite stat, it sounds like, is the 10 points above average, quarterback rating when he, for all rights and purposes, had what most people would call a horrible run of decision-making and such. But
he had a bad game for him, but it was better than average. So for most quarterbacks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's your outlook for this Saints game? There's talk about Drew Brees possibly coming back. Obviously, they have a good defense. I think Michael Thomas is still on the roster, which means there might be somebody catching balls. I don't really know that for sure. But so what are your thoughts on the upcoming game against the Saints?
Well, it's the same as it is every single week. I said at the beginning of this season, there's one team in the NFL that can beat the Chiefs, and that's the Chiefs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that if they play their game, if they play their A game, there is nobody that can compete with them. And they tend to bring their A game when they're playing their best opponents.
Yeah.
The ones they respect the most. When they went into Baltimore, before we found out that Baltimore had flaws, when I think they would have played much better against the Patriots when they came to Kansas City, had Cam Newton been available.
Mm-hmm.
When they went to Tampa Bay, look at that first quarter against Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
That shows you what they're capable of doing if they're on their game. And I think with people saying this is a Super Bowl preview and saying this is their last chance to lose this year, I'm very confident that they'll do very well against the Saints. I don't think anybody has a defense that can stop the Chiefs. And if Alvin Kamara goes nuts, and if Drew Brees comes back, and if he finds Michael Thomas, and Patrick makes some dumb decisions again, then the Saints have a chance. But I think all of those things happening are probably it's probably pretty rare, and I'm confident the Chiefs will win this Sunday.
I agree with you. And let's be clear about something. I just want to repeat what I just heard. The Chiefs are 12-1. They're also 1-12, and the 1-12 Chiefs disrespected one opponent, and it was the Raiders, and I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious. They just thought we'll turn it on when we need to, and then
they slept on it. They did.
Yeah,
100%. All right, good stuff. So I guess. I have an idea of how you're going to answer this, but where do you think this season's going? The day the season ends, what are we talking about?
Run it back.
Run it back.
I'm very confident they will make the Super Bowl. I think the Packers will be a tough match. I think the guy that's going to have the hardest time dealing with that is Jake from State Farm.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah,
yes.
He's gonna be on the sideline saying there is no Rodgers rate, but I like the Patrick Price better or whatever. But I think that's where it's headed.
Okay.
But I can't say that I wouldn't be surprised if they won. There's too many negatives in there. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. How about that?
They're going to win the Super Bowl. That sounds good. Brian, do you have any issues with that?
No, and I can't say that I'm going to get in the way of anything of that. Yeah, I would say that given everything, the way the trajectory is going and everything, I have no reason to push back against any of that. It's cooking. So I think the one thing that I took away from the whole game, the Miami game, was like Mahomes can throw 3 picks and lose 30 yards on a sack and still be winning at halftime. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly. All right. So we have 4 things that we get into that we try to be unique with. So the first one is watching these past couple of weeks of football. Who have you watched and just thought, man, I am in awe of everything you're doing. You have totally earned an assignment in the XFL when they come back.
Well, I never watched the XFL, but I think I know enough about it. I would say Tyreek Hill, just because to me, the XFL, what I think I know about it is it's built on speed. The move that he had against the safety in Tampa Bay, where he just kind of stopped and started again, and the guy went flying by him like a cartoon character. That type of thing. The touchdown run that drew him within 10-7 against Miami. I would say, and I was never, when I hit 30 a number of years ago, I didn't lose any speed because I didn't have any to lose. So I envy people, and I'm amazed by people who are fast, and he's just phenomenal.
Well, I appreciate you coming to terms with that 5 years later. I know that was something you had to deal with. So next question, let's live in a theoretical world. And I know you're pretty much your own boss, but we all have, wives and things of that nature. So let's say that you guys get together, you get 2 days off of work, you get a flight to Vegas, you get a check for $1 million, and the only stipulation is you have to come back with all of that spent betting on 3 things: the AFC champ, the NFC champ, and the Super Bowl champ. How are you allocating that money?
I'll build it from the smallest. I would probably say, if I'm going today or, this week, I'd probably stick with chalk and say Packers, because even though it's not as pronounced, they still have home field, and it's much harder for a dome team to win when it's, you guys know what it's like. You're in frigid area. I think it'll be tough for anybody to win in Green Bay, even without Packers fans there. I think the Chiefs are in the line. So I would probably put 10% on the Packers, and then probably split. I was an English major, would be 45% on the AFC champion Chiefs and Super Bowl champion Chiefs.
Outstanding.
Because since it's hypothetical, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's got a calculator out adding this. Just kind of throw a coin on the desk and we're good to go. Okay, but going heavy on the Chiefs, so that's good. So then the next to last question: if this last week of the NFL season was a song, what song are we talking about?
You told me that one was coming, and I still haven't come up with. I'm going to answer it a little differently than you asked. How about that?
Sounds good.
I'm going to, since this is totally ridiculous anyway, we'll do it that way. I thought what you meant was put my position as it relates to the NFL into a song. So that's how I'm going to answer the question. And there was a song in the early 70s, which none of you would remember, obviously. And I can't even remember the name of the group that did it, but it was called "I Am Thankful to Be an American," because only in America can you get paid to watch somebody like Patrick Mahomes pull stuff out of his rear end and surprise even his coach and have it be for your team. So how about that? I'm thankful to be an American.
That's outstanding. All right. So the last question, obviously we talked about Patrick Mahomes, and he's got a very unique cuisine style where he puts ketchup on a steak. Do you do that?
No. And being a fan of somebody doesn't mean we have to emulate them completely. No. I'm from Kansas City, and I don't even put barbecue sauce on a steak.
Yeah. Okay. I don't put anything but horseradish on mine. But yeah.
I don't even put horseradish. It's salt. Maybe a little garlic powder, depending on the kind of steak, but
sure.
Salt. That's it.
Let's be clear. When you're cooking a steak, I mean, you need butter, salt, and pepper. That's what you need.
Yeah.
And
You can put some different things on there. That's fine, but ketchup, no.
yeah. No, I agree with you. So that's just a great baseline, alignment of expectations and everything like that.
It proves he's human. He's got faults.
It does prove he's human. That's the one fault that he has. He puts ketchup on his expensive meat and everything like that. So. Alrighty. Well, thank you again for being with us tonight. Chris, hold that book up again one more time.
Yeah.
So go to davidsmalebooks.com, grab Keys to the Kingdom. If you don't have a gift for the Chiefs fan in your life, order this book, pay the expedite, shipping fee. And it's 100% worth it. There's not a better gift that you're going to get for somebody who's just a huge fan of the team. You're buying just the love and passion from the team, in hardcover format. And it's just phenomenal.
And don't forget yourself when you're buying your gifts either.
Absolutely. We've all taken care of ourselves, but make sure you do that as well. And then also, definitely check out the bracketology book. If you're a college basketball junkie like this, KU sympathizing group that's sitting here, and certainly Big 12 group, then, you definitely love your college basketball. And then also check out the podcast that's coming up, which is the sportsconnections.podbean.com.
It'll be available any day wherever you find your podcast. So, and it will also have a YouTube channel. So all of the interviews I've done so far in getting this ready to go, and most of them that I'm planning on, will be audio and video. So just like you guys are doing on video, I think it's fun to see the people's faces, not just listen to their voices. But I also know that people listen to podcasts in their cars where they're not supposed to be watching a screen.
Exactly. Well, David, once again, thanks for coming on with us tonight. We've had a great time. And, again, this is the Milwaukee CHIEFScast. Everybody keep it classy, and we'll see you on Sunday.